There's a particularly smug argument making the rounds lately, one that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with America's approach to labor and immigration. You've heard it. Ha! Now that undocumented workers are being deported, you'll see prices will skyrocket. No one will pick the grapes. No one will work the kitchen. Is this what you wanted? Yes. Yes, it fucking is. Because this allegedly clever gotcha reveals far more about the speaker than they realize. They're essentially announcing, with an air of triumph no less, that our economy relies on systematic exploitation of vulnerable workers. They're admitting that entire industries have built their business models around paying wages so abysmal and maintaining conditions so poor that they can only attract workers who lack the legal status to say no. And somehow they think this is an argument in their favor? Let's be crystal clear about what's actually happening here. Companies have been knowingly breaking the law for decades, hiring undocumented workers not out of compassion or necessity, but because these workers' precarious status makes them easier to exploit. These businesses aren't just violating immigration law, they're often violating minimum wage laws, safety regulations, overtime requirements, and basic worker protections. They're doing this because undocumented workers can't easily report violations without risking deportation. Yet, when enforcement finally happens, notably almost entirely focused on workers rather than employers, these same businesses and their defenders cry out about labor shortages and raising prices. They act as if the inability to exploit vulnerable workers is some kind of market failure rather than long overdue market correction. Here's a radical thought. If your business can't survive without breaking the law and exploiting workers, you don't actually have a viable business model. You have a criminal enterprise masquerading as a legitimate business. The response to Americans won't do these jobs should be glaringly obvious. Of course Americans won't do these jobs. At these wages, under these conditions, anyone who claims Americans are too lazy to pick grapes or work in kitchens is being willfully obtuse. Americans would absolutely do these jobs for $50 an hour, $100 an hour, $10,000 an hour. The issue isn't the work, it's the compensation. And spare me the inevitable, but the food would cost too much argument. First, this ignores the fact that labor is only one component of consumer prices, and often a surprisingly small one. Second, and more importantly, if the only way to keep your prices low is through illegal exploitation of vulnerable workers, your prices are a lie. They're artificially suppressed by criminal behavior. That's not a market price, it's a price subsidized by human suffering. The truly insidious part of this whole debate is how it's being weaponized by the very people who benefit from exploitation. Corporate interests have masterfully pitted different groups of workers against each other, convincing some that their interests align more with their exploiters than the exploited. They've managed to frame the debate about immigration enforcement as if it's about protecting American jobs or maintaining low consumer prices, when it's really about maintaining a vulnerable workforce that they can freely exploit. Want to know who's really responsible for this situation? Look at who's not being arrested in those workplace raids. Look at who's paying lobbying firms millions to fight against both immigration reform and stronger labor protections. Look at who's donating to politicians who maintain this broken system. The executives, hiring managers, and owners who knowingly hire undocumented workers rarely face serious consequences. Instead, we focus enforcement efforts entirely on the workers themselves, on the people with the least power in this equation. It's the same playbook we see with H-1B visas in tech, where companies claim they can't find qualified American workers while simultaneously maintaining arbitrary degree requirements, offering below market wages, and tying workers' immigration status to their employment, all while conducting massive layoffs for their American staff. It's not about a shortage of workers, it's about a shortage of workers willing to accept exploitation. The solution isn't complicated, though it's difficult politically. We need three things. Number one, actual enforcement against employers who knowingly hire undocumented workers. Not just fines they can write off as a cost of doing business, but actual criminal prosecution. Start putting executives and hiring managers in jail and watch how quickly these practices disappear. Number two, a streamlined, accessible path to legal status for workers who want to come here. Legal workers with protected rights are harder to exploit. They can report violations, join unions, and leave for better opportunities without fear of deportation. This is exactly why many businesses prefer to hire undocumented workers. They want employees who can't fight back. And number three, strong labor protections that apply to all all workers, regardless of immigration status, and the resources to actually enforce them. When labor violations against any worker go unpunished, it undermines conditions for all workers. The current system isn't failing, it's working exactly as it intended. It's designed to create and maintain a vulnerable workforce that can easily be exploited while providing plausible deniability to the business doing the exploiting. The fact that some people are now gloating about potential price increases or labor shortages just shows how thoroughly they've internalized the idea that exploitation is necessary and normal. Here's the truth. If your argument against immigration enforcement is, but then who will work for illegally low wages under abusive conditions? You're not defending workers, you're defending exploitation. If your response to we should enforce labor laws is, but the prices will go up, you're admitting that you're fine with breaking laws and exploiting people as long as it keeps your costs down. And if you think it's clever to point out that deporting exploited workers will lead to higher prices or labor shortages, congratulations, you've just admitted that entire sectors of our economy are built on illegal exploitation. That's not winning the argument you think it is. It's an indictment of the system that we should be dismantling, not defending. The real question isn't who will pick the grapes if we deport undocumented workers. The real question is, why have we accepted a system where grape picking can only be profitable through illegal exploitation? The answer isn't to maintain a vulnerable workforce, it's to fix the underlying conditions that made exploitation the default business model. So yes, if enforcing labor laws and immigration rules means some prices go up, then so be it. If it means businesses have to pay living wages and maintain safe working conditions to attract workers, good. If companies can't operate legally, then they should go out of business. Because an economy built on exploitation isn't just morally wrong, it's fundamentally unstable and, quite frankly, unsustainable. To those smirking about labor shortages and rising prices, your argument isn't the devastating critique you think it is. It's just an admission that you're on the side of the exploiters, not the exploited. And it's long past time we stopped pretending that exploitation is an acceptable foundation for our economy. The spice must flow? Fuck your spice. Pay living wages or close your doors. It's that simple. And let's be crystal clear about something else. Opposing exploitation does not mean supporting cruelty and enforcement. The current system is inflicting profound human suffering from both ends, exploitation by employers on one side and brutal enforcement tactics on the other. We're talking about real people, families who have built lives here, who are just trying to work and survive. There's no justice or necessity in midnight raids, in separating families, in treating human beings like cattle being rounded up. We can address illegal hiring practices and exploitation without resorting to cruelty. We can enforce labor laws without traumatizing communities. The goal should be to create a system that respects human dignity while ending exploitation, not to pile more suffering onto people who are already vulnerable. The solution isn't to brutalize workers who are just trying to survive in a system that was deliberately designed to exploit them. The solution is to fix the system itself, to create legal pathways that respect both human dignity and labor rights, and to hold accountable the people who built and profit from this exploitation machine. Yes, making an omelet requires breaking eggs, but we don't need to be needlessly cruel about it. We don't need to destroy lives and communities to enforce laws. I mean, try to imagine it. You kiss your kids goodbye in the morning, send them off to school, head to work like any other day, and suddenly you're being rounded up, detained, processed for deportation. Your children come home to an empty house, not knowing if they'll ever see you again. Or worse, they get pulled out of their classroom, their entire world shattered without warning or explanation. This isn't enforcement, it's state-sanctioned terror, and it's painfully, shamefully American. We have a long, dark history of punishing the powerless while letting the powerful skate free. The factory worker gets deported while the factory owner gets tax breaks. The street dealer goes to prison while the banker who launders drug money gets a bonus. The desperate parent gets torn from their child while the executive who knowingly hired them plays golf. The people who deserve to feel the force of enforcement are the ones who created and maintained this exploitive system, not the workers caught in the middle of it. But that would require holding the powerful accountable, and America has never been very good at that. Instead, we inflict maximum cruelty on those with minimum power, then congratulate ourselves on enforcing the law while the real criminals count their profits. So, yeah, gotcha, I guess.